So recently, you attended two events around security. One was the ISC West, which is more around like physical security, right, and products and everything. I'd love to hear about your experience there. The other one was the RSA conference in San Francisco, correct?
Right.
So, what do you want to
Exactly.
start
So,
with?
so I think we'll start with ISC. So we'll go a little like chronological.
Okay.
Um, it's interesting that, in our industry and in physical security, we talk a lot about cyber security. We talk about the threats that are coming from cyber and how they have impact on decision makers around the physical um, methodology and principles. During the ISC West, there was a lot of that as well, meaning I participated in some sessions that they had conversations about mainly, I would say mainly around like critical infrastructure. They are the ones that are really there and able to have that conversation of cyber and the impact and participate maybe in some of the activities that are happening in the other departments. On the other hand, I would say that in ISC West, there were a few angles to the new generative AI LLM that were all the buzzwords that everyone's talking about. So just to kind of describe a little bit how it's being expressed in our industry, and maybe give examples of some of those vendors that are actively working towards those directions. I would say that the first let's say angle to leveraging LLM towards our physical security departments is by having an AI agent that supports the operations, the security operations. So, for example, if let's say I am an analyst and alert comes up and I need to kind of investigate and start that process and understand how real it is, then I could really interact with a prompt that will actively help me analyze the data that is coming towards me. So that's one, low hanging fruit that's already um, getting there and starting to be implemented.
So
Uh,
you've seen this in the wild there. You've seen demos of this.
I think, yeah, you could see it in some products, right? So maybe some of the bigger platforms like the PSIM platforms
Hmm.
have more of that kind of angle where they're in setting up an agent. How mature it is, how good it works, all those bigger questions that I am not sure about because I personally did not, test it out to the extent that I could give a professional opinion about that.
Right.
But I would say that it's just interesting to know that that's the angle and direction that they're trying to take with it, and that's great, and that's something that will have to happen. Obviously, there are risks to that as well, because um, if let's say there's the CTO or someone from a different department that is the decision maker around what kind of applications and software you're implementing in your environment, now all of a sudden, if these security products have that element of AI embedded in their setup, then there are bigger questions that are raised, and therefore it will require deeper analyzing to really verify and put the quality stamp on it and say this is good enough for me to implement in my environment.
Hmm.
So that's one angle to that. The second angle I would say is around video analytics, right? So
Which is kind of, it's kind of come from the same. It's kind of the same thing from a different angle. Huh?
mm, so on one hand you're saying the same thing different angle because you're talking about the investigation aspect.
Well, video
Is
analytics is kind of like a precursor to what AI is today. I mean, when video analytics is kind of like the pre-generation of, it's like
I
a
think that
simple
in
AI in some
general
ways. Yeah.
I think that in general, the video analytics is one of the most advanced, like maybe the frontier of AI because of the amount of data that we've received through the videos.
Hmm.
we were able to kind of, as an industry, push that forward and be more innovative around it because there was a lot of raw material.
Cool. So you're
That's why we
seeing,
see all these features.
right. So you're
So what
seeing
we
some
see right
new
now,
stuff.
yeah. So what we see right now around video analytics is that you could basically create smarter analytics that are catered towards your business and your business needs. For example, I was part of I participated in a panel where there were heads of securities for a university and a commercial building and a museum, and
Right.
each one of them spoke for an hour, kind of expressing what what how do they leverage AI for their needs, right? So, for example, around the university, this university is actually in California, and they have huge parks in the university, and people come and just hang out in the park. So it's students and non-students in that university, and they have something that happens a lot is that there are people that ride skateboards and they could get hit. They could get hit by a car. They could meet an animal in some way. There could be different scenarios. Now, how do you know when it's someone that was riding on a skateboard and just got hit by a car, for example, versus someone that was riding on a skateboard and just tripped, right? Or how do you know if it was a severe situation or not? So those things are pieces that you need to be. There are a lot of details there, but using the LLMs that we have today to leverage basically the current raw data that we have and say, okay, I really want to figure out what are the events where there's really someone riding on a skateboard and just got hit,
Right.
right? And to lower as much as possible the false positive events that come up. And they were able to implement something very successful, and he showed that they were able to respond very fast to situations like that since they started that implementation.
Mm, mm.
In the commercial building aspect, you could see maybe more around the tailgating, right? I think that if some of our followers remember, we actively communicated and shared about Hakimo, which is it's a company that is
Right.
a cloud-based company that uses the access control systems to kind of analyze and figure out if there's tailgating that's happening in your facility. Here, with video analytics, we could figure it out, but because it's so like there's a millisecond, right, of that happening, and to trigger it and to really be a real alert that comes to the operating center and that they could reply in response to, that is something that's a challenge. And using the current level of AI to work on that is something that they were able to improve in their facility. Around the museum side, you could see that with museums, the sensitivity is that you want to put the art as much as possible out there for the experience of the visitors. So let's say there's a huge picture or like a portrait or something, and it's not even locked in a box, but it's worth millions and millions of dollars. So you have a lot of sensors around. You have different elements that are protecting it, but leveraging the AI to kind of correlate between all those sensors and give them the best real time alerts. That is something that wouldn't be able to happen 2 years ago.
Right.
So I think if I'm sharing a little bit some of the examples that I've seen, that's kind of the examples that I saw during the conference around how you leverage AI to kind of really create your own analytics that solve problems, real problems for your business.
Tell me, were you able to look under the hood a little bit with these products? Like, what's the basic AI engine there? Are they leasing this from OpenAI, or is there anything you could tell us a bit like what's going on under the hood?
So not really.
Mm.
In the end of the day, like any company could decide what kind of LLM they want to use and build on top. So I don't think that really matters. What
It's not
really matters
relevant.
is how well it works. and I haven't seen many vendors that it works well for them.
Mm.
But one of the vendors that it does work for them is called Ambient AI, and a lot of our clients as well are familiar and aware of it, and maybe even doing POCs right now, because they are really able to build analytics that cater your needs. So that's just
Right.
like one of many competitors that are in that space.
Cool. Any other
The
kind of highlights
Yeah,
from
so
ISC?
the third one, if I need it, like it's mainly these 3 pointers that I would say. Obviously, any booth that you would walk to at
Yeah.
ISC, they will say we are doing this, and we're doing it in the best, most innovative way. But I think that the third one is using a prompt to kind of um, just analyze anything that's going on in your system. So, like for example, let's say I have a access control system, and I want to know how to add a door or configure a card, or I want to do any kind of action that I want to take. So I'm communicating with a prompt, right?
Mm.
In the A year or two ago, we had bots, right? So bots are the same thing, just they are very preset and
Right.
they're set in stone. So if you kind of get with them to an angle where it's like their limit, they will repeat themselves, or they will tell you reach out to a real agent.
Right.
With LLM that is now implemented in these systems, you could see that there's more interaction, and the way where it's growing to is that eventually these agents will be able to take action in the system.
Mm.
So instead of saying, how do I set up this card for this user, I say set up this card for this user, and the system will do it.
Right.
And that's changing the space, right? All of a sudden, the talent that you will need to be able to work with you might not be that technical.
Mm.
So, so I'm expecting a lot of change actually in our industry in that regards, because I know that something that comes up in all regions, if it's in the U.S., outside our regions where we are operating, we know that human resources is one of the biggest troubles in our industry.
Mm.
So once these solutions will start getting in place and running better, then we will see a change in that.
Interesting. So if you had to predict what would happen, what you'd see in ISC West next year, what would you say?
Oh, that's interesting. I think that really depends on what's going to be the buzzwords of the world, because I think that in general, like different industries, they usually take from that and try to leverage the buzzwords to say, okay, this is what we did. But here again, we talked about it. We mentioned it. I think that next year it will be more about actionable AI agents supporting you.
Mm.
So the world is going that direction. By the way,
Right.
we're not. It's not unique to
It's not in
facility
isolation.
security.
Right. But
Yeah.
tell me,
So
do you think there'll be new players on the market with such offerings, or is this going to be some of the traditional players that are out there evolving and within the AI space, for example?
yeah, that's a good question. Look, there's a risk here, right? And we'll talk about it in the next part, where we'll talk about a little
Right.
bit of my insights from the RSA conference that talks about cybersecurity. But in the end of the day, the hesitation around implementing AI, this kind of AI, where it's let's say a free creature, and maybe we should kind of revisit our the episode where we talk about this and explain to our
Mm.
listeners about generative AI and what it really means. But basically, you're giving this kind of space of independence to the system. And that
Mm.
space of independence is something that another AI system could leverage. Meaning, if I am malicious and I know how to work with uh, generative AI models, then I am able to kind of find weaknesses within it and create more access. So there's a risk here. Um,
How do you mitigate that risk? We're going to see a
so I
whole
don't I
slew
don't
of
think I don't
products.
think that I don't think the bigger ones are there.
Okay.
Meaning, I don't think that the bigger vendors are there to come with confidence and say, here, we're putting this in and it works well and it's secure and all that. I think that what's going to happen is that we're going to see some more startups in our industry
Mm.
coming up and saying, oh, look, we could do this for you. I think that right now that's not the biggest ROI for businesses that want to start in that space. So right now there's more focus around medical or automobile,
Right.
customer service, very forward customer service, operating centers, etc. So I think that we will see some startups coming up on our end. Hopefully next year there will be a new section at ISC that will show that.
Cool. But just like one last point on this, it seems like the way to mitigate that the risk you just mentioned about um, the type of access that various bots have is basically it's a different type of identity management access control at the data level, and that's smack in the middle of cybersecurity and data security. So that, if nothing else, that's going to be one overlap that we're going to see probably in the physical security world. So obviously, I would like to hear what you say about what you think about that. But this is also a good way to maybe a good segue into RSA. So, are you seeing? Do you agree with what I said? And are you seeing more overlap? And then maybe go into your insights from RSA.
Yeah, for sure. I see on one hand overlap, but on the other hand, like if we talk about how the cybersecurity companies are looking at the risk regarding identities, you'll see that it's a whole different landscape right now. What's happening right now is like just like uh,
But wouldn't it have to be the same?
they're
Sorry,
lost.
but regardless if you have an employee that has access to your data systems or you have a bot that has access to your system, isn't it the same? Wouldn't
Yeah,
the
so
approach be
so
the
when
same?
you have so when you have a company with 1,000 employees and you have 150 applications that are 70% of them are on-prem, made at home, and the other 30% are cloud-based solutions. When you're leveraging AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud for your solutions, when you have um, applications that you maybe haven't even opened in 20 years that are still in your organization because of legacy reasons, then now you find yourself in a situation where you need to really be able to um, map all that out in a way that you could say, okay, I have here weaknesses in regarding to my identities, right? So if in the past a hacker has to find that identity to be able to gain access into your systems, right now you send the AI agent to go and find that for you, right? And they work in a whole different way. These agents, it's like it's just like, I'll just give you an example. I'm playing around with one of the generative AI solutions, and it's a product that builds applications from scratch.
Yeah, that's
So
very interesting.
I write a prompt. I say, I want you to build for me a Uber app. And it builds for me. It takes maps and it asks me questions. Do you want to also add charging for the clients? Do you want to add feedback? Do you want to add these kinds of features? So basically, I'm going through a whole process of designing my application and building it,
Mhm.
all with using natural languages,
Mhm.
right? And then you're saying, okay, I use that. And if you take different companies right now that are using like Grok or OpenAI or Cloud or any of those AI models, their developers are using it
Yeah.
to write code.
What are you using, by the way? What are you playing with? Which
Which one is for the application?
yeah,
It's called, let me show you one sec. It's called, sorry.
because I'm playing
Wait,
around on various aspects too. It is fun. It's a bit of a rabbit hole to go down, but it's I would
find it.
encourage everybody to actually try little mini projects like this because you learn a lot through the process of how to interact with these various platforms. It's also fun to kind of work with two at the same time and like query them both with the same kind of queries and see how they respond.
I think it's called Amplify AI, but
Okay.
I'm not sure. We could add it on our notes a little bit later. So yeah, so basically imagine that the whole process of the development and the execution is happening by itself, right? And tomorrow morning you say, okay, I want to have an actionable agent that's independent that right now, when let's say we have new employees, it'll create all their identities and set up the onboarding and all that by itself. It's
How do you
it's
know that they
great.
don't? they don't. There's no hallucination happening at that level. They could also be
You
problems
don't
with it. You
know.
don't know.
You don't know exactly. That's what I'm saying. So once you have someone that's more malicious and taking that kind of idea and leveraging it, that means that now the whole cybersecurity industry needs to think about that in
Right,
that way.
right,
And that is different. And that's
right.
why when you take, you see like Wiz was acquired by Google for a crazy number, right? There's a reason to that. It's because like cybersecurity companies are not thinking about that right now. You go to the to get cybersecurity services, you have the SASE applications and you have the endpoint device management and you have different elements of protection, but nobody is really aware of how to mitigate this risk. Now, during the RSA conference, um, one of the panels that I joined was was basically someone actually from Wiz talking about a phishing attack that they had that eventually led to a ransomware. And when they did the investigation and they kind of, it's a longer story, but basically they found out that what happens is that this group of hackers, they have their fake business, they put it on Microsoft Azure cloud, right?
Mm,
And then from that Microsoft Azure cloud, they go and try and hack many other small, medium businesses. Once they figured out access, that's when they start to just keep that access. They're not ransomwaring, they're not doing anything. Nobody knows they're in there.
mm,
They're starting to try and hack and gain access to other companies.
mm,
So it's all already with some, screens that they are creating. And then from there going into the Azure, they figure out a way to get a key access because it's documented on your Office 365 or one of your active directories, a key to access the AWS and to get even a root user or to get a user, because in the end of the day, when there's an integration between two different cloud services, you need that kind of identity that's responsible to that
mm,
integration. So for them, that's the honey, right? So they get that, and then they're in the AWS system, and they're in your Azure system, and then they click the encryption, and they encrypt it all, right? So you see the sophistication, and you can't do that like easily, and
mm.
you can't do that with traditional tools, let's say, of hacking tools. So it requires these elements of being able to like just let a system, let AI work on it and figure it out itself.
Mm.
So a lot's going on around that space. I do think that like uh, everyone at RSA obviously is talking about our new AI models and basically the concerns that arise around it and how to mitigate those risks,
Mm.
right? And I don't think they're there regarding the answers. It's just the understanding that we have to think about it right now. And I would say that's why we know that there's kind of a conflict. And I talked to some people that are CTOs and that are kind of maybe or CISOs that are very against allowing their company to use any of these models. It's because they don't know how to deal with it, right? And to take that liability on themselves for the sake of the efficiency, it might not be worth it for them. So till that's not really figured out, I don't think that we will see that big jump. I know that the bigger vendors like Microsoft, Salesforce are trying to kind of persuade their clients into this trust of that their systems are good and okay and safe. But on the other hand,
There's still there's the matter of integrating between different clouds that still exists, regardless of how great Microsoft is.
it doesn't matter. Exactly. Exactly. It doesn't matter. And
But
yeah,
how common is that? How common is it that larger companies are actually using? Why would they need to use multiple clouds? Why not just stay in one cloud environment?
because because first of all, you have different departments around software and products that you're developing and using in your organization. So let's say I am part of the finance department. For me, I know that there's a specific model that AWS offers that will change my life,
Mm,
right? So I'm going to get it. And then someone in customer service says, wow, Salesforce has the best customer service, field service model. I need to use that,
mm, mm.
right? So that happens. That's kind of
So it's not,
natural.
so the cloud platforms are not as commoditized yet as you would think. There are
No, because they
differences,
grow,
uniquenesses.
right? Because they grow. Like if you talk about AWS and all the tools that they have around business analytics and basically the data flows and the ability to aggregate them and to build on top of them, and just the whole way that they work is very different than Microsoft.
Right.
But on the other hand, I don't think that someone has a real ability to compete with the level of domain management that Microsoft has,
Mm.
right? So therefore, I think that in the end of the day, being a multi-cloud environment is something that should be pretty common in bigger companies.
I see. Okay, so any other takeaways from our RSA? And I'm curious. It seems like you walked away from that a little bit pessimistic about the state of the state of data security and everything.
Yeah, look, in general, when I
It's scary.
when I when I finished my military service, I was already pessimistic, meaning I already reached my limits around that. I think that the thing is that because it's a cycle that's constant, and because there's always going to be malicious people, industries that are trying to kind of utilize weak people and take from them and steal from them.
Mm.
Here you see, like even on a basic level, just for example, right? In our neighborhood here, in the last few months, there's been thieves that what they do is they go and look for elder people in their 80s and 90s. They sit with them on a bench or wherever they see them on the street, and they just steal their jewelry, right?
just
And you
just
listen
just
to
right
them,
there.
just right there. Take the jewelry and go.
Right.
They talk to them, schmooze with them, and they take it and leave. Right. So there's always like malicious people in the world.
Right.
Right. So when we have this kind of set of innovation, that's opportunity. When
Mm.
COVID happens, people could steal more from everyone.
Right.
And the US is struggling with that and will struggle with that for maybe 15 years of all the people that were stealing during COVID.
Mm.
So I think that on the cyber landscape, for me personally, like it's just that this whole new Pandora box has just opened up, and that means that there's no like it's not going to be balanced and set in ease, right? If we thought that eventually all the because let's go back a little bit in history, right? When we had a security strategy that said that we are going to create silos in our environment. We're going to do segmentation, where the financial model and the HR model will never communicate with each other. And that way we'll protect each one from each other in case
Makes
something
sense.
happens. Right? That's how we thought in the past.
Right.
But then you come with a zero trust network environment where you're saying I'm creating a perimeter to my network and I'm allowing inside the communications, but I need to create a strong perimeter, a strong pieces to my puzzle to protect from anyone coming in. Then we shifted it. And now when you're saying, look, I can't even protect not that around and I cannot create silos because I'm already used to the functionality. And
Mm.
also I recognize that silos are not really silos.
Right.
So
and
so
throw
now
and throw on top of that remote working and mobile workforce and multiple
100%.
endpoints, and you have a whole salad of potential opportunities for hackers. It is quite crazy. But how do we help build awareness? Because I feel like the larger companies, they're kind of on it, they know it. It's the smaller and medium sized companies that seem to have less awareness and less resources to deal with it. And this problem is not going to go away. It's not going to be reduced. It's only going to become more prevalent, more incidents are going to happen. And just as personal experience, my daughter, who was a teenager, recently watched a Black Mirror episode about something similar to this, like hacking or something like that. And she came back to me and started talking to me about it. But the end result of that is that we had a good conversation about how to protect yourself and kind of like hygiene with your data and stuff like that. And start talking about multi-factor authentications and like, I'm helping her set up a password software. I tried to talk to her about that before, and so my face was blue. She didn't want to hear.
100%. Also, you know, I told this to my friend because when we were at the conference, I was with my car and I told him, because he was holding my keys, did you lock the car? Right. And every time we leave the car, I ask him, do you lock the car? And he's like, every time you're asking me, you know, like I don't think about it. And I'm like, yeah, because someone stole my car in the past. So
Right.
I think about it all the time.
Right. And
So,
the marginal cost of asking that question, like a little confirmation loop,
right.
is nil, is zero. Why not, do it? It's a good practice.
So I would say that like if I need a, one thing that I could say that is a method to kind of create some sort of barrier.
Mm.
It's it's by the first of all, password management, identity management, all the
The
things that
basics.
we repetitively, that's the basics.
Yeah.
You need to be very strong with that. You need to have high standards, even if it hurts your development team, just make sure that that's what happens. The second thing is an element of refresh in your environment. So
Mm.
something that happens with
Sorry, define that. What do you mean? Double click on that.
I'll explain. So, like for example, with virtual machines, there's a feature called snapshot, for example,
Mm.
or backups that you take, right? So, if you're able to take a backup of the software and the data that you're storing is going like it's like two different things, right? So, you have the software and you have the data that's the software is trying to access.
All right.
So regarding the software, if you refresh it, you refresh the cache, you refresh the whole server that's working with that software. That way you're able to kind of, if anything infiltrated you, you're able to kind of delete it in a way. So
By the
that's
way,
one thing.
doing the same thing on your browsers is also helpful.
Yeah, 100% cookies, all that for sure. And the third thing that I would say for today is build a community around yourself. You know, have conversations, just like you said you had with your daughter. If you're able to have a meetup of once a month with, I'm sure any region they have people that meet up and talk about security threats. Just go and participate and listen and ask your questions and keep on going with that and share it with your organization. That's part of kind of building up that awareness.
Yeah, I worry that executives in medium-sized companies they still have limited bandwidth, and it's a lot to go down. I would recommend companies to, at some level, invest in like a virtual CISO or some degree of something to get a little bit of impact and feedback externally on the organization. Um, what happens is either they wait until something happens and then they invest the money,
Yeah,
because something sooner or later is going to happen, and it's just a matter of being smart about it and mitigating that.
yeah, 100%.
Okay, my friend, anything else to before we wrap this up?
No, I think that's pretty much the recap on my end. Obviously, please take a look online, ISC West News, and you could see more details about specific product announcements. Some products announcement came out around the bigger vendors and the smaller, so just take a look at that. With RSA, it depends if you're in that space or not. It could be an overkill to try and just look into that.
Right.
But in the end of the day, it's good to know the approach that cybersecurity professionals are taking and try and learn from that.
Just a final thought. You mentioned about how you could build an operating, not operating system, but like a software, like from scratch now. When will we get to the point where companies can build their own internal Salesforce like product from or something like this, and then it becomes, then those kind of products become obsolete, and why would people need to buy such products?
Yeah. I think that in that matter, it's we kind of have a gap here right now.
Uh-huh.
You know how like at the time when internet came, the boom of internet or smartphones, the older generation didn't really get into it in the same way that the younger generation, was born into it. And I think that that's something that's happening now, meaning we're the older generation right now, right? And if people that are in the organization will not have the time provided by their superiors to say, okay, invest in this, sit and learn and spend time on this, make mistakes on this. Like if that's not going to happen, then they have no chance in the next few years at least.
So you think it's going to happen? It's just a matter of time, basically.
Yeah, yeah,
There
it's
was,
it's knowledge.
I want to share this link with you. I'll share it with you after the show. But basically, is in Bloomberg talking about how some of the new startups today are like limiting their headcount to like 5 people and doing everything with bots and everything, and like these crazy stories. Now we'll see how it pans out. But if you're thinking about the future and if you're in business in any way, these things are likely in one version or the other going to happen.
Right.
And hopefully it translates to efficiency. And those that are early adapters and are take advantage of it or and smartly will probably benefit sooner or later.
Yeah. Like I think if we take just, and obviously we could keep on talking and talking about this, but if you take, for example, online marketing, right?
Mm.
Is there a reason for me to do online marketing today? To anything that I'm trying to sell, Like if I need to set up my SEO, if I need to have posts on social media, if I'm some kind of product or something like that, if I need to like generate a lot of content constantly, I don't think there's a need for a human being to do that today. You could set it up pretty much and you could let it go.
I
So
wonder if it could be 100% independent and autonomous like that. There seems to be like all these bots can be like almost like a great assistant. Like it can build it up to a certain point, and then you still need kind of to overlook it, oversee, supervise maybe to a point. What do you think?
I think that like any other employee, right? If you have someone that's
You have to give feedback.
if you have someone that's coming in for how do you say how do you say it
Like expertise, subject matter expert.
coming like for itmahut, someone from like a university fresh
Right.
out of coming in for
From a
how do you call
major. Yeah.
Yeah, so if someone new is coming in and they don't know anything, then you're touching base with them 3 times a day. But if you have someone that's been working with you for 10 years, you probably won't reach out to them every day.
Right. So you'll treat it like any other employee, basically.
I think so.
Probably.
Yeah.
Okay, my friend. This is very thoughtful. Great insights. We will continue to be observing this space, obviously, and hopefully some people learn from this a bit. Stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon. Yeah.
Likewise. Thank you.